city never really slept. It only changed its rhythm, like a heart that beat differently when no one was listening. Under the amber glow of streetlights, glass towers reflected a world that thrived on secrets. Among them was a man named Ethan Ward, a name that on paper seemed ordinary enough, but beneath the quiet confidence of his tailored suits and smooth voice lay the kind of restlessness that could destroy everything he had built. Ethan was 42, a financial strategist at a private equity firm, living a life most would envy: corner office, waterfront apartment, and a wife whose elegance turned heads. Isabella Ward was everything polished society expected: graceful, well educated, and loyal in every visible way. They were the couple people photographed at galas, the kind who smiled as though their happiness was a settled fact. But in private, silence had replaced warmth long ago. Their marriage had become a performance, well rehearsed, seamless, and empty. It began to fracture the night Ethan met Clara Rivers. She was a consultant hired by his firm for a short-term project. Bright, sharp-tongued, and fearless in rooms full of older men. Clara had the kind of presence that made people turn twice. Not for her beauty, but for the intelligence behind her eyes. She was in her early 30s, independent and indifferent to appearances. Ethan told himself it was harmless: the late-night talks, the shared drinks after meetings. But he knew exactly what he was doing when he lingered too long beside her desk, when he told her things he hadn't told Isabella in years. The affair began not in a moment of passion, but in quiet confessions over whiskey and city lights. It was intoxicating, dangerous, the kind of risk that made Ethan feel alive again. Clara, for her part, wasn't nervy. She knew he was married, and she knew she should stop. But what began as curiosity turned into something deeper. She liked the way he looked at her, not as a colleague, not as a conquest, but as if she was the only person who saw through his polished mask. Weeks turned into months. They became careful. No texts that could be traced, no photographs, no public meetings. Everything lived in shadows. Hotel rooms under false names, phone calls made from private numbers, the thrill of secrecy fueling every stolen hour. Ethan told himself he could control it, but control is a fragile illusion. And like all illusions, it shatters when tested. One evening in late autumn, as the city was washed in cold rain, Isabella discovered something she wasn't meant to see: a forgotten hotel receipt in Ethan's briefcase, dated, signed, and damning. She didn't confront him immediately. Instead, she waited, observing him with a calmness that was more terrifying than rage. She smiled when he came home, served dinner as usual, even asked about his day. But inside, something in her broke, not cleanly, but in sharp, splintered pieces. Isabella wasn't the type to scream or throw things. She was strategic, the daughter of a judge, raised to believe that power wasn't in emotion, but in precision. Over the next few weeks, she hired a private investigator, discreet, efficient, expensive. Within days, she had photographs, dates, and enough evidence to dismantle her husband's reputation. But she didn't go to lawyers. She went to Clara. The meeting was arranged under the pretense of business, a casual coffee near the firm's office. Clara arrived unsuspecting, rain still clinging to her coat. Isabella sat poised, every movement deliberate, every word measured. "Clara," she said softly, stirring her coffee without looking up. "I know about you and my husband." The words hit like cold steel. Clara's pulse quickened, but she tried to compose herself. "I think you're mistaken," she began, voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. Isabella looked up then, eyes sharp. "Please, don't insult both of us. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to end this. before someone gets hurt. There was no threat in her tone, only certainty. The kind of certainty that made Clara's stomach twist. Isabella slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, hotel logs, and a note, "Walk away, or I'll destroy you both." Clara left without finishing her coffee. For days, she wrestled with guilt and anger. Ethan, when she finally told him, reacted with disbelief, then panic. "She wouldn't dare," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. He knew Isabella's intelligence. He had admired it once, now it terrified him. That night, for the first time, Clara saw fear in him and realized that he wasn't a man of courage, only of comfort. Their affair had never been love, it had been an escape. And now that escape was closing in. Ethan promised to handle it, but handling it meant something different to him than it did to her. In the following week, Ethan began withdrawing large sums of money from hidden accounts. He met discreetly with a man named Derek Cole, a fixer known for cleaning up private scandals for executives who couldn't afford exposure. Derek was blunt. "You want her silenced or gone?" he asked. Ethan hesitated. "Just gone from my life. People don't disappear cleanly." Derek replied, lighting a cigarette. "But for the right price, I can make her regret crossing you." Ethan didn't answer then. He only nodded slightly, as if agreeing with himself. Meanwhile, Isabella's composure began to crack in private. She had always believed control could protect her from pain. But control couldn't erase the image of her husband with another woman. She spent nights staring at the city through glass windows, imagining all the lies told behind lights like theirs. She wasn't just betrayed, she was humiliated. And humiliation breeds vengeance. The investigator she'd hired, Simon Lark, was more than just a detective. He was observant, charming in a rough, edged way, and surprisingly sympathetic. Over late night calls discussing evidence, Isabella found herself confiding in him. What began as a professional exchange began to feel personal, dangerous. She hated herself for it, yet couldn't stop. Simon listened to her not as a client, but as someone who mattered. And somewhere in that moral blur, lines began to cross. The story's balance, already delicate, started to tilt. Ethan, growing paranoid, believed Isabella was preparing to ruin him publicly. His firm's partners had started asking questions about his absences. He knew the scandal would destroy his career, maybe even land him in jail for misused funds. Every decision now carried the pulse of desperation. Derek's solution began to sound less outrageous. "She's already talked to a PI," Derek said one night in a dimly lit bar. "That means evidence. You don't solve that with apologies. You erase it." Ethan's hand trembled slightly around his glass. "You're suggesting murder." "I'm suggesting closure," Derek said calmly. "You want your life back. Some stains only come off in blood." Ethan didn't answer right away, but silence can sometimes be consent. One Friday night, Ethan returned home late. Isabella was in her study, pretending to read. He kissed her cheek, something he hadn't done in months. And she smiled faintly, a performance they both understood. Over dinner, they talked about nothing, the way couples do when everything important has already been said and buried. Then, as she poured wine, Ethan watched her carefully. He had mixed something into her glass, a clear liquid that left no trace. Derek had provided it, assuring him it would look like a heart failure, natural and quiet. Ethan told himself this wasn't murder. It was mercy, an ending to pain. They toasted to new beginnings. But fate has a cruel sense of irony. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Simon Lark stood there, unannounced, rain dripping from his coat. Mrs. Ward, he said, I think we need to talk. It's urgent. Ethan froze. Isabella looked confused, then suspicious. Simon stepped inside, holding a small folder. I found something you should see, he said, glancing at Ethan. Ethan's world tilted. The folder contained photographs of Derek, of cash exchanges, of Ethan's meetings. Simon had been tracking him too. Isabella's private investigator had turned his lens on both of them. In that instant, everything fell apart. Isabella realized Ethan had been planning something, and Ethan realized Simon knew too much. The glass of poisoned wine sat untouched beside her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Isabella broke the silence. Ethan, what did you do? He tried to speak, but the words came out as fragments. Excuses, justifications, fear. Simon stepped closer, his voice low. You were going to kill her, weren't you? Ethan's mask finally cracked. The polished strategist vanished, leaving only a cornered man. His voice trembled. I didn't mean, I just wanted. Simon moved forward. Ethan's instincts took over. He grabbed the wine glass, swung it. It shattered against the edge of the table. In chaos, Simon lunged. They struggled, the sound of glass and breath filling the room. Isabella screamed as Ethan pushed Simon backward. He fell, head striking the marble floor. Silence. Simon didn't move again. Ethan stood frozen, chest heaving. Blood pooled beneath Simon's head, dark against white stone. Isabella stared, trembling, tears welling not from grief, but shock. She looked at Ethan, her husband, the man she'd once loved, and realized she no longer recognized him. Call the police, she whispered, but Ethan's mind was already racing. No, he said, shaking his head. If we call them, it's over for both of us. They'll think the truth, Isabella said. He turned toward her then, something desperate in his eyes. We can fix this. And that's when she realized he truly believed it. The room smelled of wine and fear. Ethan stood frozen over Simon's body, the last seconds replaying in his mind, like a scene he couldn't rewrite. The blood spreading across the marble looked unreal, too vivid, too final. Isabella backed away slowly, her hand over her mouth. Her mind was blank, the world spinning in fragments, the noise, the fall, the silence that followed. Ethan, he's dead, she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. His hands trembled, his breath uneven. In the chaos, he felt a strange clarity, the kind born not of calm, but of total desperation. He knelt beside Simon, checking for a pulse he already knew wasn't there. His fingers came back red. He stared at them, as though seeing his own guilt made physical. Isabella's voice cracked. We have to call the police. He turned sharply. No, you don't understand. They'll never believe it was an accident. The money, the meetings, the investigator. They'll think I hired him killed. Her eyes widened. You did hire someone. That's not. Ethan stopped himself. You don't know what you're saying. Isabella took a step back. I know exactly what I'm saying. You were going to kill me. The silence that followed was colder than the night outside. For the first time, she saw the truth in his eyes. A flicker of guilt so deep it needed no words. Ethan's voice dropped. You weren't supposed to be here tonight. It was supposed to end quietly. Quietly, she said, shaking. You were going to poison me and call it mercy. He reached toward her, almost pleading. Isabella, listen to me. Don't touch me, she screamed. Her voice echoed through the high ceilings, raw and human. Then, after a long, trembling pause, she steadied herself. I'm calling the police. Ethan's next words were quiet, deliberate, the tone of a man who'd crossed too many lines to turn back. If you call them, they'll take everything. My job, the firm, the house, all of it. And you'll go down too. You think they'll believe you didn't know? That you weren't part of this? Isabella stared at him, her composure faltering. He saw the hesitation and moved closer, gently, almost tenderly. "Let me fix it," he whispered. "Please. Just let me think." She didn't stop him when he picked up the broken glass. Didn't stop him when he dragged Simon's body toward the back door that opened into the garden. Her mind was a blur, shock and disbelief blurring into one. She wanted to scream, but her body felt paralyzed, as though trapped in a nightmare too real to escape. Ethan's voice came again, urgent and low. "No one saw him come here. We get rid of the body tonight. We clean up. By morning, this never happened. Ethan, this isn't a mistake you can clean up." "It is," he said firmly. "It has to be." By midnight, the garden was silent again. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth soft and dark. Ethan dug with an old spade, his shirt soaked, his breath turning to fog in the cold air. Isabella stood nearby, holding a lantern, her eyes fixed on nothing. When he finally lowered the body into the ground, she turned away. He whispered something, a prayer or maybe a curse, before covering the grave. The sound of dirt hitting flesh was dull, final. When it was over, they returned inside. Ethan stripped off his clothes, scrubbed his hands until the skin turned red. Isabella poured herself another glass of wine and stared out the window, her reflection fractured by raindrops. Neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer emptiness. It was guilt made solid. The next morning, the city woke as if nothing had changed. The skyline still shimmered. Cars still moved in orderly chaos. But in the ward apartment, everything was different. Ethan had already left before dawn, his mind consumed with logistics. He wiped surveillance footage, deleted messages, checked Simon's emails. Every move calculated, every trace buried. He was good at this: problem solving, planning, surviving. Only now, the problem was murder. Isabella stayed home, her body aching with exhaustion. She hadn't slept. The image of Simon's face, pale and still, replayed endlessly in her head. She knew Ethan would cover everything, but she also knew secrets like this never stayed buried. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Her heart stopped. But it wasn't the police. It was Clara. "Isabella," Clara said, surprised. "I didn't think you'd be home." Isabella hesitated, her voice barely steady. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk to Ethan," Clara said. "He hasn't been answering. I thought maybe." She trailed off, seeing the dark circles under Isabella's eyes. "Are you okay?" Something inside Isabella cracked then, not visibly, but deep down. She looked at Clara, the woman who had taken her husband, the woman who had somehow been part of this spiral without knowing it. And instead of hatred, she felt something unexpected: pity. "You should stay away from him," Isabella said quietly. Clara frowned. "What happened?" Isabella's lips trembled. "He's not who you think he is." Before Clara could respond, Isabella shut the door. Ethan returned later that evening. He looked calmer, eerily calm, as if last night had been another business deal he'd simply concluded. "It's done," he said flatly. "Everything's taken care of." Isabella didn't respond. She couldn't. He sat across from her, studying her face. "We have to move on. Pretend nothing happened." Her eyes met his. "You killed a man, Ethan." "Hay fell," he said coldly. "Accidentally." "You killed him," she repeated. Ethan stood abruptly. "You think I wanted this? He forced me." She flinched. "You could have called the police. You could have told the truth." He exhaled sharply. There's no truth anymore, just survival. The words hung between them like smoke. 2 days later, the police arrived. It wasn't because of a witness or a slip-up. It was because Simon's agency reported him missing. His car had been found abandoned near the Ward's neighborhood. And when detectives traced his last known call, it led to Isabella's number. Detective Harris Langdon, calm and methodical, arrived with a partner. He introduced himself politely, but his eyes scanned the apartment like a hawk. "Mrs. Ward," he said, "you were the last person Simon Lark contacted. We'd like to ask a few questions." Isabella nodded faintly. "Of course." Ethan joined them, his tone steady. "What's this about?" "Simon's missing," Harris said. "We're just following up on some leads." Ethan feigned surprise expertly. Decades of corporate negotiation had taught him how to lie with conviction. "That's terrible. Simon was helping my wife with a private matter." "Did he come here the night he disappeared?" There was a pause, just long enough for Harris to notice. "No," Ethan said finally. "We haven't seen him in days." Harris nodded, making a note. "If you think of anything, please call." As they left, Isabella's hands shook. "They'll find him," she whispered. "Not if you keep quiet," Ethan replied. "Do you understand? One word, and we both go down." She looked at him then, truly looked, and realized she was no longer afraid of losing him. She was afraid of what he'd become. Over the next week, Isabella began planning quietly. Not revenge, freedom. She met with her lawyer in secret, began moving small sums from joint accounts into a private one. She didn't care about the money. She cared about having an exit, but guilt has its own gravity. The more she tried to escape it, the deeper it pulled her in. Every creak in the apartment, every unexpected call made her flinch. Meanwhile, Ethan was unraveling. He started drinking more, snapping at colleagues, missing meetings. His firm began asking questions. Not about his marriage, but about financial discrepancies. Someone had tipped them off. That someone was Clara. After being shut out by both of them, Clara had hired her own investigator. What she found: Ethan's hidden accounts, Derek's criminal ties, and a missing detective was enough to connect dangerous dots. She hadn't planned to ruin him, not at first. But when she realized how close she had come to being another disposable secret, anger replaced heartbreak. She sent the evidence anonymously to Detective Langdon. It didn't take long before the cracks widened. Langdon returned one evening with a warrant. Ethan's office was searched, his phone seized. Questions about unauthorized withdrawals and potential obstruction began circling. Ethan deflected, denied, spun narratives, but the walls were closing in. That night, he confronted Isabella again. "You told them something?" he accused. "I didn't," she said quietly. "Then how did they know about the money?" "I don't know, Ethan." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You're lying to me again." She didn't move. "You've been lying to me for years. I'm done pretending." For a moment, he just stared at her, eyes cold, unreadable. Then he turned away, laughing bitterly. "You think you can just walk away from this? From me?" Her answer was a whisper. "Wes." That word cut deeper than any accusation. Ethan's expression changed, the anger fading into something darker. He walked to the cabinet, poured himself another drink, and said quietly, "Then you leave me no choice." That night, Isabella packed a bag. She planned to leave before dawn. But as she zipped the suitcase, she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan stood in the doorway, drink in hand, eyes glassy but alert. "Going somewhere." She froze. "I'm leaving, Ethan. It's over." He smiled faintly. It's never over. Not until I say so. There was a knife in his other hand. Not raised, not yet, but gleaming in the half-light. Isabella's breath caught. Ethan, put it down. He took a step closer. You made me do this. All of it. You and your investigator, your games. Ethan, listen to me. But he wasn't listening. He lunged. She grabbed the nearest thing. A heavy glass vase, and swung. It shattered against his shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't fall. They struggled, the knife glinting between them. And then, in a single blurred motion, Isabella turned the blade back. A sound, low, guttural, filled the room. Ethan's body went limp, collapsing into her arms before sliding to the floor. The silence that followed was suffocating. She dropped the knife, shaking, staring at the blood pooling beneath him. For a long moment, she couldn't move. Then instinct took over. She called 911, her voice trembling. There's been an accident. When the police arrived, she didn't lie. Not this time. She told them everything. The affair, the poison, the body in the garden. Every word spilled like confession and release. Harris Langdon listened silently, jaw tight, eyes heavy with disbelief. You realize what this means, he said quietly. I do, she replied. But I'm done hiding. They searched the garden that night. The rain had softened the ground. It didn't take long to find the shallow grave. Simon Lark's remains confirmed everything she'd said. Ethan Ward was declared dead at the scene. Isabella was taken into custody, not in handcuffs, but with a strange kind of dignity. The kind that comes when truth finally replaces fear. The media wasted no time. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. Finance executive dead in domestic dispute. Wife confesses to double crime. Headlines screamed from every screen, each retelling the tragedy like a cheap morality play. The perfect couple. The secret affair. The murder that followed. Inside the police station, the lights were unforgivingly bright. Isabella sat at a metal table, hands clasped, posture still elegant, despite the exhaustion pulling at her face. Her statement had already been taken twice. Every detail was dissected, every motive questioned. She answered steadily, though her voice carried the fragility of someone standing on the edge of collapse. Detective Harris Langdon watched her closely. He'd seen killers cry before. Tears didn't mean innocence. But there was something about Isabella's composure that unsettled him. She didn't cry for herself. She cried for what she'd become. So, Langdon said, his tone even. You're saying your husband killed Simon Lark, and you killed your husband in self-defense. Isabella nodded slowly. Yes, he was going to kill me. Langdon leaned back in his chair. You realize how that sounds. I don't care how it sounds. It's the truth. He studied her. You could have run sooner. You had money, opportunity. Why stay? Her eyes flickered with pain. Because I still believed the man I married existed somewhere inside him. I thought I could reason with him. She paused, looking down at her hands. By the time I realized I couldn't, it was too late. Langdon's expression softened. He'd dealt with enough domestic tragedies to recognize that particular kind of naivety. The kind that killed people. He closed his notebook. For what it's worth, Mrs. Ward, I believe parts of your story, but there's still a lot that doesn't add up. What doesn't add up? She asked quietly. Derek Cole, he said, sliding a photograph across the table. We found records of wire transfers from your husband to this man. You mentioned Ethan hired him. What for? Her face went pale. To fix things. Fix what? She hesitated. Minnie. Langdon's jaw tightened. And where's Derek now? I don't know, she whispered. Ethan said he'd take care of it, that I wouldn't have to worry anymore. Langdon stood, his mind racing. He'd heard the name before. Derek Cole, former private contractor turned underworld problem solver. Men like him were ghosts until someone dug them up. And if Derek was still alive, this case wasn't over. 3 days later, Isabella was released on bail pending further investigation. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Alina Graves, met her at the courthouse steps. The cameras flashed mercilessly as Isabella walked past, chin high, coat drawn tight. Every shout from reporters felt like an accusation. Elena, she whispered as they entered the car. Am I going to prison? Alina adjusted her glasses. That depends on what the police find. You've confessed to killing your husband, yes. But the circumstances matter. If we can prove self-defense and establish that Ethan intended to kill you, we have a chance. And Simon, Isabella asked quietly, I helped bury him. That complicates things, Elena admitted. But confession works both ways. It makes you guilty and credible. Isabella turned to the window, watching the blur of city lights. I don't feel credible. I feel haunted. Detective Langdon, meanwhile, was chasing ghosts of his own. Derek Cole had vanished. No phone records, no address, no trace. But a name like his left shadows in certain places, offshore accounts, fake IDs. A storage unit under an alias. Inside that unit, Langdon found something that changed everything. A black case. Inside, a syringe, chemical vials, and a burner phone. The messages on it were brief and coded, but clear enough. Eat it done clean. Need it quietly. DC. Price just doubled. You sure you can live with this? EW. I already am. Langdon exhaled slowly. It was proof of premeditation, Ethan's intent to kill. But more disturbingly, the final message was time-stamped after Simon's death. Which meant Derek hadn't disappeared after all. He was still out there. And someone else might still be in danger. Weeks passed. The city moved on, as cities do. But Isabella couldn't. She lived alone now, in a small rented apartment across town. Her fortune was frozen, her name whispered through tabloids. But the quiet was worse than the noise. Every night, she heard echoes. Ethan's voice, Simon's last breath, the sound of shovels against wet earth. She tried therapy, meditation, prayer. None of it helped. Her reflection had become a stranger's. One night, she found herself dialing a number she hadn't deleted. Clara Rivers. Clara answered, cautious. Isabella, it's me. Isabella said softly. I need to see you. There was hesitation. Then, why? Because we both loved the same man, and neither of us knew who he really was. They met at a small cafe, away from downtown. Clara looked different, tired, wary. There was no hostility, only the quiet understanding of two women bound by tragedy. I wanted to hate you, Isabella said after a long silence. But I can't. He lied to both of us. Clara nodded slowly. He was charming. That's how he survived. He told me he was leaving you. I believed him. I used to believe him too, Isabella murmured, until belief became denial. Clara looked at her carefully. Why are you really here? Isabella. Isabella's voice trembled. Because I think it's not over? Clara frowned. What do you mean? Detective Langdon found proof Ethan was still working with Derek after Simon's death. He was planning something else. I think Derek's still out there. And I think he's watching me. Clara hesitated, then leaned forward. You're not imagining this. Isabella shook her head. A car's been parked near my building every night. No plates. No driver. Just there. Clara's expression hardened. If that's true, You need protection." "I don't need protection," Isabella said. "I need closure." That night, a shadow moved outside Isabella's apartment. Through the window, faint headlights flickered and died. A figure stepped out, tall, broad, coat pulled high. He stood there for a moment, watching the light in her window. Then he moved toward the entrance. Inside, Isabella sat perfectly still, clutching a kitchen knife. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the footsteps in the hallway. When the door handle turned, she raised the blade, the door opened, and Detective Langdon stepped inside. She gasped, lowering the knife. "Jesus. Harris!" "Good evening to you too," he said dryly, closing the door. "You weren't answering your phone." She exhaled. "I thought." "I know," he said. "You're not wrong to be afraid. We found new evidence. Derek Cole's fingerprints were on the burner phone." "Then find him," she said. "Please." "We're trying," Langdon replied. "But there's more. Someone wired $50,000 to an offshore account linked to Derek last week." Her eyes widened. "From who?" He hesitated. "From one of Ethan's old accounts." "That's impossible," Isabella said. "He's dead." Langdon's gaze didn't waver. "Unless someone else had access to his accounts." The next few days blurred into paranoia. Isabella began seeing Derek everywhere, in crowds, reflections, passing cars. She'd wake at night certain someone was in her apartment. Sometimes, she'd call Langdon. Other times, she'd just sit in the dark, knife in hand, waiting for a threat that might not even exist. Until one night, it did. The power went out around midnight. At first, she thought it was a city outage, until she heard the sound of her back door latch click open. Her breath hitched. She moved silently, barefoot, across the apartment. In the faint light of the street lamp outside, she saw a silhouette move through the kitchen, slow, deliberate. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. Then a voice, low, familiar, and chilling. "You should have left it alone, Mrs. Ward." Derek Cole stepped into the dim light, his eyes hollow, his expression unreadable. "Ethan paid for peace," he said calmly. "But peace doesn't come cheap. And now, someone has to settle the rest." She backed away, heart racing. "What do you want?" "The rest of my money. And the evidence Langdon has." "You think you can bury this, but people like me don't disappear. We adapt." She tried to keep her voice steady. "I don't have your money." Derek smiled faintly. "Then I'll take something more valuable." He moved toward her. She turned, grabbed the lamp from the table, and smashed it against his arm. He staggered, but didn't fall. They struggled, his strength overpowering hers. He shoved her against the counter, the knife clattering from her hand. Just then, the door burst open. Langdon, gun drawn. "Drop it," he shouted. Derek froze for half a second, then lunged toward Isabella. The shot rang out. Derek collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a thud that seemed to echo for miles. Langdon rushed to Isabella's side. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears spilling freely. "It's over. It's finally over." Langdon holstered his weapon, exhaling. "Not yet. There's something you should see." He handed her a flash drive. "We found this in Derek's pocket. I think it's the last piece." Isabella stared at it, afraid to touch it. "What's on it?" Langdon's expression darkened. "Proof that your husband wasn't working alone." The next morning, in the precinct's evidence room, they played the file. A video appeared, grainy, dated a week before Ethan's death. Ethan sat in a hotel room, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," he said, "then something's gone wrong. Isabella can't be trusted. She's planning to expose me. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. She's capable of more than you think. Isabella's breath caught. He set me up, she whispered. Langdon nodded grimly. He left a trail. To destroy you if things went wrong. Classic contingency. Tears welled in her eyes. So even in death, he wanted control. Langdon placed a hand on her shoulder. He doesn't have it anymore. You do. She stared at the screen, then at the detective. No, she said quietly. No one ever really has control. That's the lie. The air in Daniel's apartment was heavy with fear and rain. Evelyn stood near the window, heart racing as distant thunder crawled across the city. Daniel paced, hands trembling, his shirt still damp from the storm. He knows, Eve. Daniel whispered. Michael's been 2 steps ahead of us. I can't stay here. We need to disappear. Tonight. Evelyn's voice quivered. Disappear. And go where? I can't just vanish. You don't understand him. He'll find us. Daniel stopped pacing. Then let's stop running. I have something that can destroy him. He opened a drawer and pulled out a flash drive, holding it like a weapon. All his offshore accounts, fake invoices, everything. If I leak this, he's finished. But Evelyn's gaze hardened. You kept that from me. I was protecting you. No, she said slowly, her voice sharpening. You were using me from the very beginning. He tried to step closer, but she recoiled. Daniel, who sent those photos to me, the ones of us. He hesitated. That split second of silence was the answer. It was you, she whispered. You blackmailed me to push me away from him. So I'd choose you. Daniel looked desperate now. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just wanted you to see who he really was. Evelyn turned away, tears burning. You both lied to me. You both wanted to own me. Maybe you deserve each other. A knock shattered the moment. 3 sharp raps on the door. Daniel froze. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Michael's voice came, calm and chilling. Open the door. Daniel, let's not make a scene. Daniel's hand shook as he loaded a gun. Evelyn whispered, Don't, please. He didn't listen. He opened the door, and Michael walked in, wearing the same tailored control he always did. His presence colder than the rain behind him. Well, Michael said softly, the journalist and the wife. What a cliché. He glanced at Evelyn, his tone almost kind. You could have come to me, Evie. I would have forgiven you. I always forgive what I can still use. Daniel raised the gun. You're not leaving here alive. Michael didn't flinch. You won't shoot me. You're not that stupid. The air snapped with tension. Evelyn's eyes darted between them. One man built of arrogance, the other of obsession. Both dangerous in their own ways. And that's when she saw it. The faint red light blinking from the camera on the table. Daniel had been recording. Everything. Michael's voice softened. Still the journalist, huh? Always needing an angle. Daniel hesitated again, and that was enough. Michael lunged. A struggle erupted. A violent blur of shouts, glass breaking, the gun twisting between their hands. Evelyn screamed. A single shot fired. Silence. Daniel fell. Michael stood panting, blood streaked across his sleeve. The gun dangled from his hand. Evelyn stared in horror. You killed him. Michael turned to her slowly. No, you did. Before she could speak, he tossed the gun toward her and stepped back. That camera's been recording since you walked in. It'll show you fighting, panicking, shooting him in self-defense. I'll call the police. I'll say you confessed to the affair. The tape will back me up. You'll go down for this, Evelyn, and I'll be free. She froze, realization crashing through her. The man she thought she'd married had scripted every second of her downfall. But then, Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced down, and his confidence faltered. On the screen was a message. Live upload complete. File saved to multiple locations. Evelyn smiled faintly. You didn't notice the second camera. Michael's face drained. She nodded toward the painting on the wall. Daniel was paranoid. He had a backup feed that streamed everything to his cloud, including you shooting him. For the first time, Michael looked small. You're lying. Evelyn stepped closer, her tone calm, detached. The voice of a woman who'd spent too long being cornered. You taught me how to lie, Michael, and how to plan. You should have realized. I learned from the best. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the gunshot. Michael panicked, turning toward the window. In his haste, he slipped on the blood, hitting the glass hard. It cracked, then shattered. By the time police arrived, they found Michael Hart's body on the street below. Evelyn sat motionless, her hands stained red, eyes empty but steady. In her statement, she said nothing about the cameras, nothing about the files. She didn't need to. The footage surfaced online 2 days later, an anonymous leak. Michael's crimes, Daniel's betrayal, every secret laid bare. Evelyn disappeared shortly after. The gallery closed. The apartment sold. But sometimes, late at night, security cameras in the city picked up a figure visiting Daniel's grave. A woman in a black coat, leaving a single white rose and vanishing before dawn. They called her the widow ghost. No one ever proved who she was.